Lewis Hamilton has clinched his 6th world title. His teammate Valtteri has taken 2nd place. But what's going on with the rest of the field? In this video, we're going to talk about who's trying to grab the final few places in the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship. In particular, we're going to cover 3 drivers and their statistical odds going into the Brazilian Grand Prix and what they have to do to secure their place amongst the top 10 drivers on the grid. So if you're sick of seeing videos all about Lewis and Ferrari, well, this is the video for you. So stick around if you want to find out who's going to make it in the top 10, what are the odds, and the 3 drivers, just to give you a heads up, are going to be Daniel Ricciardo, Sergio Perez, and Lando Norris. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already to the channel if you like any of this content. Independent content creators go through a big fight to get our content out there, being pushed down by YouTube for a preference for the big channel. But with your help and support, there's absolutely nothing they can do to stop us. So let's get into it. Just 15 points separates P9, P10, P11, P12, P13, and P14. That is Daniel Ricciardo all the way down to Kimi Räikkönen. 15 points is something that can be made up in just a single race. But what are the odds that these things happen? And so just to keep this video relatively short, we're just going to focus on P9, P10, and P11. Hülkenberg obviously still has a path to getting in the top 10, as does Daniel Kvyat and Kimi Räikkönen for that matter. But we're just going to focus on those in direct contention with being in the top 10. Starting with Daniel Ricciardo, who has 46 points right now, just 2 points above Sergio Perez. Ricciardo is interesting because he has 5 DNFs, and his average place when finished, his classification, is about a 9.5. That results in somewhere between 1 and 2 points. The caveat to Ricciardo's performance all year is the fact that he has 5 DNFs and 1 DQ. So when looking at the statistical odds of him actually placing in the top 10, you have to bake that in. So with an average race completion rate of 73.68%, you end up getting 1.47 points you can expect Daniel Ricciardo to get in Brazil and also in Abu Dhabi. So in aggregate, over the next 2 races, you can expect Daniel Ricciardo to pull in 2.94, which will round up to about 3 points. So his projected points total goes from 46 to just under 49. Again, we'll round up to 49 exactly. And that puts him at a projected P9. Sergio Perez is different from Ricciardo in that he only has a 10% DNF rate. So he's got a very good completion rate and classification rate. He has 44 points through all the races this season thus far. The reason Sergio Perez is such an interesting driver when you look at these calculations is because Sergio, of his 7 races since the summer break, has only finished in double digits 1 single time, and that was actually in the last race. So when you think about performance as it relates to the average and how Sergio has progressed throughout the year, he's gotten a lot better. So the momentum is definitely with him despite having a P10. It's likely that he could punch above his weight and score better than his average. But let's say that Sergio hits his average, which is actually a 10.1. If Sergio were to remain consistent there, when you also consider the fact that he finishes 89.47% of his races, he's going to end up taking a projected 1.8 points, which will round up again to 2. So you could reasonably assume that Sergio was going to end the season with about 46 points. That would be P10 if we were looking at things without any sort of oddities or anything we can't calculate. The third and final driver is a driver that makes all of this interesting. It makes all of this not really sure how things are going to play out, and that's Lando Norris. And Lando Norris is very interesting for a lot of reasons. When you look at Lando Norris's partner, Carlos Sainz, he's locked up best of the rest. And you wonder why Lando Norris isn't up there. And I've always been pretty quick to say, well, it's because he's a rookie. But in actuality, Lando Norris has had to battle some pretty bad luck when you look at his McLaren. He's got 41 points in P11 right now going into the Brazilian Grand Prix with 6 DNFs. 6 DNFs, the only driver on the grid to have a higher percent DNF rate at 32%. Just about a third of all of his races end in a DNF, which that is crushing if you are him. When Lando Norris does finish a race, though, he's finishing somewhere between P8 and P9. So if we were to round up his average positional score and all the points he gets from that, he would end the races with a P9. But because his DNF is so high, which we did in everyone in this calculation, we have to multiply the average points he gets by the percent likelihood that he'll finish a race, which is significantly lower. That means on average, Lando Norris is taking 1.36 points home per race and what we can expect in the final 2 races. That would give him a projected 2.73 points for the rest of these 2 races. If things held like this and he was consistent, he would finish at a P11 with 44 points. Now let's get to the actual odds, and because this isn't a video about statistics and more just a quick video ahead of the Brazilian Grand Prix to get us all acclimated to what's going on near the middle of the grid, we'll start with Ricciardo, and his P9 odds based on everything we just talked about are at 90%. His P10 odds are at 10%. The fact that he would drop out of P9, it's unlikely, and for him to fall all the way back to P11, there's a 5% chance that could happen. Now, if you're looking at that and going, well, that doesn't add up to 100, it's not supposed to. These are variant calculations that are not dependent on each other. They're independent outcomes with a lot of things at play. Again, this isn't a stats video, so we can go through it. If you have a question in the comment section below, let me know. Moving over, though, to Sergio Perez, his P9 odds are at 10%. His P10 odds are at 84%. And his P11 odds are at 16%. Now, the smoking gun again in Sergio, and it applies to Ricciardo as well, but it is Lando's ability to score points when his car is reliable. And that is why Ricciardo in P9, despite him having a decent gap with only 2 races left, he's not all that safe. Sergio has been on a string of good performances, which goes into the model, as has Lando, who's got a reliable car, and he's got a lot of pace. His car just can't make it half the time. Well, a third of the time. Lando's odds to jump Sergio and Ricciardo, that's not that likely. That is at 5%. The reason it isn't 0% is simply because Ricciardo also has a pretty high DNF rate himself, and Sergio Perez is very reliable, so it's just unlikely, but it's not 0. A little bit more likely is Lando landing at P10. Now, the one thing I couldn't put in here are going to be my own bias. If I had my own bias in the model, this would be higher. Lando ending up in P10 would be pretty high because I do think that the McLaren will make it to the final 2 races. But again, history has proven to us that I would be a fool to assume that. More likely than not, more likely than anything for Lando, it's going to be him landing at P11, right where he is, 74% chance. And I thought this kind of video and content would be interesting for those of you out there who, again, who are sick of the same types of videos and conversations happening. But as you can see here, when you look at these 2 drivers and who's going to end up in the final 10, it would be a very good year for Lando Norris indeed as a rookie, considering the fact that he's had so many issues, if he can land in P10. Now, there is the biggest opportunity for Lando, judging by the fact that he has some of the best midfield performances when he actually finishes a race. What's going to make chasing down Ricciardo very, very difficult is because he simply does get results. Again, if he can finish a race, Ricciardo is able to get very good results. He either has very good results or he's way back in the pack. We never really know, but the only people that score obviously are in the top 10. So whether you finish 20 or 11th, you're still getting no points. I'll be making a lot more content related to the Brazil Grand Prix, but I just want to try something new. We'll see how it does. And if you guys like these sorts of data videos, I can make some more. A lot of the work comes in the editing process anyway. So this is Cranky Yankee signing off. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you guys soon.